Last night, Declan Rice and Arsenal absolutely cooked Real Madrid as he scored two brilliant free kicks. In my opinion, that second one is the second greatest free kick of all time. And in this video, we're going to take at some of the tactics of how Arsenal in particular played in position. As always, do subscribe to the channel, help us to get this family to grow bigger. When Arsenal looked to build up from the back, you would see the centre back splitting on either side of the goalkeeper. And what was interesting to me was how the left back Miles came in as a double pivot next to Partey, ultimately moving Rice and Odegaard a little bit higher. And what Real Madrid did, they basically would sit on top of the double pivot, and Bellingham and Rodrigo would come in extremely narrow. In this instance right here, we see the centre back splitting on either side of the goalkeeper, where you would see Lewis Kelly joining Thomas Partey in the midfield as a double pivot. And look at Jude Bellingham and Rodrigo coming in extremely narrow, closing down the centre. Real Madrid were defending in a 4-2-4 situation or a 4-4-2 depending on how you look at it. But what's very interesting was Bellingham and Rodrigo staying narrow to actually block out all central progression, where they would first wait until the ball goes out wide before they would press from an angle, even in the situation where Mbappe or Vinicius had to press the goalkeeper. Here we see Rodrigo pressing from an angle once the ball goes to the touchline, and Madrid was sifting in order to close down the nearby options that the guy on the ball had to pass to. However, the positioning of Miles really had Real Madrid bugging, because he wasn't just an inverted fullback to make up numbers. In the situation where he needed to, he would even drop into the back line to create a 2 against Mbappe, and Saliba and Timber would have a 2 against 1 against Vinicius, right? So this allowed, if they stay tight on the centre backs, then Kivior and Timber would have an easy time progressing the ball. Therefore, they would put Rodrigo in two minds whether or not he should press. Over here, we see Miles dropping in between the centre backs, actually as a left back, which is crazy if you think about it. And Mbappe doesn't really know whether he has to follow or stay on Kivior, right? And here we see that him forming a back line, but actually between the centre backs as the left back. And I feel like Vinicius and Mbappe is actually the worst players to have in this situation, because they have no tactical defensive awareness, right? And then actually allows Kivior to drive up the pitch, which ultimately leaves Rodrigo in a sense whether he should press or should he stay narrow and keep the center closed down. Even though this would get Arsenal around the press of Real Madrid, the fact that Vinicius and Mbappe is really on the centre backs, meaning that Kivior could really be in some trouble if Rodrigo made it in time there. However, Martinelli made up for this by coming extremely deep in order to pick up the ball, which ultimately leaves Valverde in a situation: should I go or should I stay? If he stays, then Martinelli can form a 2-on-1 situation. It is even better if Valverde would follow Martinelli, meaning that Declan Rice could easily get in behind. Asensio cannot really follow him, because then you have Mikel Merino in behind, along with Odegaard and also Thomas Partey. So this was just heavenly football from Arsenal. If Mbappe would just make a little bit more effort and press Kivior in the situation, then Rodrigo wouldn't have to come out, because look at Martinelli already coming back to make up for that space between him and Kivior. Over here we see that Martinelli has the ball now, or he's receiving the ball, and Valverde in this instance is staying, right? And look at Moreno and Rice already getting ready to run in behind him. Look how Valverde then is scored up high, and now Declan Rice and Moreno is running at Raúl Asensio and Rudiger, and look at Odegaard as well. With Bellingham and Rodrigo being so narrow, Arsenal really had a conundrum. But it was really easy for Odegaard, the movement had he provided, to come into these areas right there in the situation where Jude Bellingham would press Timber, then he could just get the ball in those areas. But for the most part, he would just simply come through here in order to draw Bellingham, and then you would see Bukayo Saka inverting, and therefore Timber would go forward, and then these two would have a 2-on-1 situation against Alaba. And it also felt like Alaba was being targeted specifically in this game, as most of the runs went through Saka within the first half. Bellingham wants to press Timber as he receives the ball as the third centre back, but he has to be mindful of Odegaard, who is right there in the presence. Do I press or do I keep tabs on Odegaard, right? And you can see Odegaard would really just lurk in those areas, and Ancelotti didn't do anything really to make sure that Jude Bellingham is in the best situation possible to be able to defend this. And look at how Odegaard drops deep, and ultimately Jude Bellingham doesn't follow him, but also be mindful of how Timber would actually go forward and actually be on the touchline there, as we see that Bukayo Saka was actually drawing Alaba closer to him because he was being mindful, and Timber, they had a free run. So this is really great tactics from Arteta. In the second half, Arteta tried to actually target the flanks of Real Madrid because he noticed he had a lot of success. That's why you would see on Valverde's side that Martinelli would come extremely deep in order to get on the ball. He was trying to get Valverde to come out, or at least draw Rodrigo out, where you would see Declan Rice and Marino going to have 2-on-1 situations against Valverde. But also you would see even Declan Rice came all the way back here in order to do the same thing. You saw that Mikel Merino was also coming there to do the same thing and just play them through the wings and get the ball into the box. Here we see Martinelli coming extremely wide and almost like a left back in order to get on the ball and also to put Rodrigo in two minds. Does he press wide or keep the center closed down? You can see Rice and Marino all coming over to the one side so that Marino and Martinelli can actually be 2-on-1 against Valverde. And here you see the same thing. Rice and Martinelli being 2-on-1 against Valverde, with Mikel Merino dropping into these areas. So the flanks were definitely targeted for Arsenal. At this point, I don't think even Ancelotti noticed this, but Martinelli, Rice, Odegaard and Saka was actually playing man-to-man to his back line. And Mikel Merino was actually making up numbers centrally and dropping all over the place to get on the ball. And nobody could really follow them because, like we talked about, Rodrigo and Bellingham has to stay narrow, while Vinicius and Mbappe would also stay on the double pivot. So Marino was making up numbers everywhere. Here you see a 2-on-1. You can see with the pivots, you can see a 3-on-2 receiving the ball from here. So Mikel Merino's movement, the false nine position that he played, was also insane for Arsenal. And it's mind-boggling that he didn't change this, Ancelotti. And also him running deep. Many times when the ball would go into these areas, you would see it was actually Modric that had to follow him. And no wonder Mikel Merino scored a goal as well. Over here you can perfectly see how the guys were well organized and positioned to take advantage of the space. And look at Merino running from deep from his false nine position and dragging Modric with him. And look how far the two fullbacks of Real Madrid defended because they were stretched. And also look at Camavinga having to make up for that space. Otherwise, Declan Rice would be in acres of space, right? And you can see they always had a bunch of players around the ball. So this is just really great tactics and really schoolboy errors from Carlo Ancelotti. Like, why wouldn't you want to put your guys in better positions to be able to defend these situations? Clearly, Arsenal were targeting the flanks of Real Madrid, and Ancelotti absolutely did nothing. As always, do subscribe to the channel. It's going to help us a lot to get this family to grow. This is my new channel for tactical review. I also have a channel called Tactics FCB for Barcelona only. Thank you very much.